we all have a day, and some of us walk around thinking we don't, but we do. And in this case, it came just with a diagnosis. I remember telling her just to talk to Jesus. We told ourselves at the beginning of our diagnosis we wouldn't get angry with God, and we kept that promise. We didn't, because he was still loving despite. And eventually, it was like, we have to put a ventilator on her. Her breathing's going to stop, and we hope the ventilator will like give her time to recoup and heal. But we both knew most time when people get a ventilator put on, they're not coming off it. So it was kind of a goodbye.
All right, everybody. Today's guest is Dan Graham. Dan spent over 20 years in the police force. He's a father to 5 boys, and Dan was actually a huge part of my childhood. I was good friends with his son, McGuire, shout out Mac, and Mac actually had a huge part in my testimony and me coming to God. This was probably one of the deepest episodes that I've had, and we touched on so many amazing things, and I'm so excited to share this one with you guys. I really hope that, God willing, somebody out there can take something from this conversation, and I just want to thank you guys for watching. But without further ado, let's get into this episode. You want to kind of walk me through like the first chapter of your life, maybe like where you grew up, childhood, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Woodstock, Ontario. My mom, my dad, an older sister, name's Jeannie. Um, yeah, typical family of 4. It was a Christian family. Church was a regular part of our life every Sunday, a lot of times twice Sunday. Yeah, immediately brought into a faith-based family. Uh, yeah, it was a big part of our lives. All my parents' friends the majority were Christian people too. They were raising their children in the faith. So it was immediately a big part of my life. So yeah, and it was an evangelical upbringing, like really scripturally based on the gospel that Jesus came down to earth from heaven, and he served, he ministered, he came, he was crucified and resurrected for our sins. So I was implanted at a very young age. One thing I will say about that faith at that time, there was a lot of legalism in it, I would say. A lot of the rules, right? The do's, the don'ts. And a lot of people that look at faith or religion, they look at it as a rules and regulations. And a lot of
Just checking off the boxes, right?
100%.
Doing what Christians are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the grace, I think, was missing. So I think when you focus on the rules and regulations, when you mess up, because you will, we all will, we'll continue to the day we die, we're flesh. But when you do, then you have like extreme guilt. And when it's a legalistic thing, I found myself more as a child, I would run from God instead of run to God during the times of messing things up, right?
Yeah.
And it just wasn't really communicated, that love and the grace of God, how like he understands that we're going to sin, that we're going to mess up, and that he just wants us to come back to him,
Yeah.
and he's going to welcome us with open arms.
To bring us closer to him, right?
100%. So I think just during those years, it was wrestling with that, and it was never truly communicated to me, like about God's grace and how it all works. And I knew even scripturally why we're told not to do things. It was just don't do it, but not the explanation is why you don't do it.
Yeah.
How it's going to lead to hurt or addiction, or it's going to learn to lead to shame. Like, why are these things in the Bible? Why is God saying don't do it? It's not to take away our joy. It's actually to keep our joy from being taken. And it's the opposite, but the world thinks opposite of that.
Yeah. It's like to stop us from taking part of like a false joy, right? Like something that we think is going to be joyful, but it's ultimately leading us to death, right? Because all that joy is temporary, and eventually it's not even going to be joy. It's just going to be like despair. You're just going to be doing it just because you have to, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I used to think the same thing about like why does God want us to not do this, not do this, not do this? Like he wants us to just have this boring life, right? And that's not it at all. Like I went to a youth conference for the first time, and I was like, I had a blast, And I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
if you would have told me that I would have had fun doing this last year, even when I became a Christian, I'm like, I don't know if that's me. Like I love God, but I don't know if that's quite like my calling. And then like I had so much fun, and um, it's because my perspective changed. I'm not looking at it as, oh, he's some like mean, bossy parent that wants us to just do nothing but suffer. He he's actually he sees the things that we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right? So
And the avenues we're gonna go.
yeah.
Like, I'm sure for you, when the drinking started, it was because it's fun and it's the party and it's what everybody did.
Even for the year after I got sober, I thought I was just drinking because I was bored. It wasn't until year two I did the work and I realized what the problem actually was. And it wasn't until I went back out, started gambling, and tried to fill that void again, until I realized trying to fill the same void for the same reasons, just with something else, right? And but like you said, I thought it was just, oh, I'm just trying to have fun, or I'm just, it makes it more fun if I have a little buzz, or
Mm-hmm.
blah blah blah. And fast forward, next thing you know, I cannot do anything without it, right?
That's
And
it. And God knows that, and
mm-hmm,
that's why the warning is
yeah,
just avoid it. So, so yeah, I was reasoning that, right, and not understanding grace, and then high school comes, and I started just creating my version of Christianity, one that's comfortable.
yeah.
And
And are
one,
you like involved in sports and stuff like that, or
yeah, I'm heavily involved with like baseball during
okay?
the summer and hockey during the winter, and
Did you have any other like maybe teammates or people that you played sports with that maybe were also attending church with you, or were you kind of on your own with that journey?
no, in the younger years, for
Yeah.
sure, there was some group of us boys that went to church together, and some were involved in the sports as well. It's kind of a mix. I would say when, baseball was more my prominent sport, but so not really on the travel team that I played on, and a lot of the boys that I grew up with were like either a year older or a year younger, so we didn't mix in sports a lot. Um, but like to be able to sit there and identify another Christian on my baseball teams, for instance, growing up, probably could not identify one. And shamefully, I'm not even sure if they could identify me as a Christian at that time, right? Because you're trying to fit in.
Yeah.
They definitely would have identified my father, but, he made it quite clear. And that's a strength that he definitely had that I probably didn't acknowledge as a child. I'm like, more, why can't we fit in, right? I want to fit in. So yeah, during those years, it was just more creating a comfortable Christianity. I
Mm-hmm.
attended church long enough to know how to speak like a Christian when I'm around Christians, but unfortunately, there's the compromise with the non-Christians because how are they going to judge me?
Yeah.
Are they going to not like me? And that's how like Satan starts creeping that into your head right at a young age. And unfortunately, it became a really huge stronghold for the majority of my life. And then, as a youth, the other strongholds that started taking place, right? The idolatry, like sports, like you bring up, it became huge, right? It became more than God. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes an idol, right? It wasn't, hey, what can I do with this sport for him? It was,
Mm-hmm.
it's faith based on me. How does this serve me?
Yeah.
And
He
yeah,
blessed me with this talent, so I have to go do this now, right? Like you know what I
I
mean?
don't even know if I looked at it that way. It was
Yeah.
just like I'm looking for accolades, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Achievements,
I'm
like
looking for praise for me. I'm not looking
mm-hmm.
for praise for him. And I think most young athletes probably go through that unless they're taught properly. But yeah, it was just, yeah, high school was a year of ups and downs spiritually. Like I knew I didn't really want to fit in, and I knew when I went to the parties, I wasn't overly enjoying them, but I
Yeah.
felt this is like the only way to fit in. Um, but there was times where youth groups, you feel the presence of the Lord, and you want, like, never in my life have I ever not believed. I never wanted to live for Him. I just couldn't fully surrender to it. And that pattern started in high school. I got baptized when I was 17. Like there was periods of my life that I was firm, I would say firm in my faith, but still creating versions of not being obedient to certain things,
Yeah.
like that my flesh desired, I would go to it and go, okay, I'll look for forgiveness after, right? And that's a horrible pattern to get in. So
Yeah. It's kind of a side note, but like just out of curiosity, like in these years where you're going to, like you said, you're starting to go to like parties and stuff like that, and but you're also going to like your youth groups and your growth groups, your young adults and stuff like that, right? And I remember we talked off air a little bit, and you had mentioned feeling like you were living like this double life, and I'm just kind of curious. I know that like I've known you for a long time, and I don't think I don't recall, but did you ever was your relationship with like alcohol or substances, was that always just pretty normal because of your relationship with Christ? Like you never kind of felt pulled to overindulge or anything like that? Like there was never anything there?
never
Okay.
that was never a problem. Like, and I would even say, even in high school, I wasn't a big drinker.
Yeah,
Like,
it was
we'd
just the
go,
social aspect,
you'd
right?
have a couple nights that you
Yeah.
would, but it was never an issue for me that
Okay.
way. Like,
Yeah, I was just
God definitely
curious
protected me from that.
because for me, the first time I ingested alcohol, I loved it, right? From the first time I put it in my body, I loved the way I felt, and I wanted to feel like that forever. So, and I'm just like, it's interesting to see how some people can, maybe it's based off the way they viewed alcohol growing up, or maybe just the way they were raised. Like, I don't know what really factors tie into it, but it's interesting to see how people's perspective of alcohol is so different, like
100%.
depending on the circumstances, right? Because for me,
100%.
I was so excited to have my first sip, and then when I did, I loved it, right? And then there's other people that are like, I don't even know if I ever want to try that, right?
And maybe for you and me, the difference might have been because I'd already had that Christian foundation,
Yeah.
that every time I did, I knew it was wrong right from the start.
Yeah.
Right. So it was that conviction.
Mm-hmm.
So I had kind of drawn that line that I'm not going to, and by God's grace, it just that taste. Some people get that first taste, like you're saying, and it's like, it's got them.
Mm-hmm. And for
And
me, there was zero thought in my head that it was wrong, right? Like nothing in my growing up told me that it was wrong.
right.
Um, like like I grew up playing hockey and stuff, right? Like every weekend, the parents are having a few beers,
Hmm.
and like I maybe saw my dad drunk once a year. My mom's a recovering alcoholic, so she's sober. So
Hmm.
like I don't see my mom drink anymore, and it's just like it was always a social thing that everybody appeared to be having fun. Maybe maybe one or two people maybe had a little too much to drink, and all it was, oh, look at Jimmy's dad had too much to drink. Like big
Hmm.
deal.
And it's commonplace in the
Yeah.
world. And like, it's not, I'm not even going to speak to like people come to different areas. Is alcohol like something you completely avoid, or like,
Yeah.
and the Bible talks about intoxication,
Yeah.
and
It's
that's
not a
where,
sin to drink, it's a sin
yeah.
to be of intoxicated
It
mind, right?
does, and that's when it leads to issues. But for some people, it lead to issue just a taste, and then the addiction, right? So, you know,
For me, I can't have a taste without getting
right,
intoxicated, right?
and,
One
and you
drink.
know that, and God knows that,
Yeah.
and that's why the warning: if you can avoid it and you don't need it, and
Yeah.
so for me, yeah, it never was a big issue. It was just more of a fitting in thing. I wouldn't even say I liked it that much, to be
Yeah.
honest. It was just again to fit in, and I wouldn't say like it was prominent. I wasn't every weekend partying
Yeah.
with people. There were, like I said, there was times in my life that I was in my high school years. I was actively involved with the church,
Hmm.
and my last few years, I was in a relationship with a girl who had just had a horrible car accident, almost died, and
Yeah.
had to learn to walk and talk again. So a lot of my last couple of years were either working, like I worked a lot, or
Or God was using you
or
in someone
spending
else's
with
life,
her,
right?
and yeah, I'm quite confident God was probably protecting me from
And teaching you, right?
100%, and
Yeah.
developing the character in me for later on in life too.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, like I said, that was off topic. I don't know that I couldn't help but think of that. Like at the time that you're going to like growth group and also going to the parties, like there's got to be like this, like you said, this conviction that's taking place a lot, right? And I just wasn't sure if it was like something that you really were excited to go do, or something that you just felt like you kind of had to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know if I mentioned, but yeah, when I was there, I wasn't even really enjoying
Yeah,
it
you
that
said you were
much.
saying that you didn't even know if you liked it. You're
Yeah.
just Yeah.
I'd
Okay.
much rather be playing a sport or watching
Yeah.
a good movie or spending some time with friends or
Okay.
whatever. But it was that seed of trying to fit in that became such a big part of my life later on and caused that conflict between the world and my relationship with Christ, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So going into like you went to university or college or the next couple years, like, do you want to kind of visit those next few years?
Not a lot of change,
Not a
honestly.
lot of
Like,
change.
again, it was consistently like, Well, God never left. He was very persistent with me, and I was just very rebellious, right? And not like overtly rebellious, just doing my own thing, my version of Christianity, and surrendering to myself more and my flesh more. And I went away to college again, and there was many times and occasions like, and I don't know if this will resonate with some people, where okay, I'm going to college now, all new people. It's not the people in high school that knew me as the compromising guy who would party. I can start fresh and be a old Christian, right? And then you meet them, and that desire to fit in hits again, right? And you go to the first party with them in the college class, and then it's so much harder to go back and declare yourself a Christian once you give in the first time, right? And that was the pattern of my life. So, yeah, I went to college in Sarnia. I was taking social work based on that relationship that I had with a girl in high school and seeing the people that worked with her. I felt that was something that like was drawing me. I would love to do that kind of work and help
Mm-hmm.
people and care for people. And then I met another lady during a field placement in college, and we kind of hit it off. And we both claimed to be Christians at the time, but again, not fully surrendering, living Christian lives. And within a year, we got married, and just from the onset, it wasn't a good relationship. It
Mm-hmm.
was tumultuous throughout most of the relationship. We did have 3 children together, three
Just want to jump
boys.
back for 1 second.
Yeah,
You were
sure.
19 when you got married?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, very young, and I'm like, I found a Christian. This is what God wants.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad will be happy. I'll be happy. But it was just, I didn't understand. That was my version of a
Yeah.
Christian, not what,
Yeah.
and I was definitely not praying about being in God's will at the time, nor did the relationship start in a healthy way that was honoring to God. Like looking at your fleshly desires versus your spiritual well being. And as a result, 3 children later, the marriage dissolved. I'm 30 years old now. I have 3 young boys that need a dad. And, God created the nuclear family to
Mm-hmm.
be together. And then, there's a purpose for the mother, there's a purpose for the father. Now I got 3 young men that didn't have a full time dad. Right. And you can't go back from that,
Yeah.
and now I'm just currently trying to restore those relationships and be the spiritual head, but it's a lot harder when you're older and they're
Yeah.
established their lives, right?
For
By
sure.
God's grace, we still have a good relationship and we
Yeah.
still get together, and but it's not without struggles that have taken place throughout the years. But
Yeah.
so that was again the same period of me, just moments of being on fire, I would say, for the Lord, but it was be brief. And I
Yeah.
think the big thing, one, I didn't attend church regularly enough. Two, I didn't get involved with the community enough. And my time in the Word and in prayer was just not enough. And I think without those things, you're going to struggle. God created that environment for you to flourish. And I look back now and go, yeah, that wasn't existent enough. And that was a big part of it.
Yeah. So I know we talked a little bit off air and like we don't want to spend too much time on this portion, but if you could summarize like in that first marriage and with those 3 boys and stuff, if there's one thing that you think like one main thing you think God was trying to teach you in that time, looking back, what do you think that would be
I think the same thing we talked about that he's been trying to teach me since I
the
was a
whole
young
time?
man. Like, do you love me? Am I enough? And do you love me enough to trust me and
100%.
follow me 100%? And unfortunately, again, during that time, I was like, I still want me. I I want to chase my desires.
Yeah.
And each time, now looking back, they lead to regret, they lead to shame, they lead to, you know, children that have struggled at times and they still struggle as a result of my decisions,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, it's just it's, all encompassing lessons that were at times I would listen and try to, be a better dad, be a better husband, better, but there were glimpses. It was never like this just complete full, okay, this is how the rest of my life's gonna, and it doesn't mean that it would come without struggle. The Christian life is you're guaranteed struggle, but it's just more that consistency with going to God frequently and walking with him through that. So I think it
Yeah.
was those lessons, and just wasn't ready to receive it during that time.
Okay. Um,
And during that time, sorry, I had switched over from social work. Like in the early years after graduation, went through a lot of contract work and nothing stable. Now I had children I had to think about, and policing had never been really something that I had thought about, to be honest. But my wife at the time, I actually saw an ad in the paper, and she go, "Why don't you try this?" And a friend of mine really wanted to be one, so he's like, "Hey, let's pursue this together." And so we did. And after I think a year and a half, I became a police officer. 25 is when I got hired with the Chatham Kent Police here in town.
nice. Okay. So at 25, um, and at this time you're living on your own with like the three boys, or you're in a separate from the marriage now? And
No,
you're
no, at 25, we're
okay.
still married.
Okay.
Yeah,
So do you want to kind of like fast forward a bit to the next
sure.
little section? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 25, the second child on the way in the
Mm-hmm.
first marriage, and career was going really well. And it
Yeah.
actually turned out to be, I think God knew that was the career for me for sure. And the social work end actually blended very well with policing, learning how to communicate, solve problems. You're dealing with the same people and trying
Yeah.
to just problem solve, right? So it became a really good career for me, a good career choice. So I had that going for me. But again, it's about fitting in, so not boldly Christian. Some might say they knew I was religious, maybe, or there was some parameters set up there, but still compromise, right?
Yeah.
Convincing myself that compromise, okay, I'll work that out with God. Uh,
For sure.
but at 30 is when the first marriage dissolved, ultimately. Yeah. And then the relationship, you know, maybe 9 months later, started with Kathy.
Okay.
We had known each other at work, but not in any way other than coworker. I didn't honestly even know her all that well, but um, she had went through a bad marriage breakup, and yeah, we just came together, I guess, and started what became a beautiful relationship.
And then how long after would you say that, like, did you know right away that she was a believer and that she was
Again, old patterns, Logan.
full
And
patterns?
then this is what I talk about when I talk about the strongholds and the old patterns. Beginning a relationship that's not honoring to Christ, right? And um, Kathy wasn't saved at the time. She had a belief in God. She was brought up in the Catholic Church too. She had a strong belief in God and a faith, but I wouldn't say like a total Christian faith. Um, And again, we got together. Uh, we moved in together. We weren't married, right? And at the time, I wasn't really attending church a lot. I was more working, much more in the world at that time. Still claiming to be a Christian, still convincing. It's funny how you can compromise things and you can convince yourself that, based on my God will be okay with this, based on my situation. How could he not be okay with it, right? But sin is sin. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
change. I can't change the word of God to fit my lifestyle, but I was trying to. And then, yeah, then we had been living together. Wonderful relationship. We got along great, and then we got pregnant with McGuire.
So how old were you when you had Mac? Or when you guys realized you were pregnant with him?
I want to say I was around 32
Okay.
at the time.
Okay. So,
And Kathy was 6 years older than me too. She had no children from her first marriage.
okay. And did you guys get married shortly after, or when did that kind of take place?
Yeah, yeah, we did. And that conviction came in. We got to do this right, and right. And we had started attending church at Emmanuel with Pastor Andrew, and I'm like, that conviction, right? And it's like we got to make this right. So yeah, it wasn't long after that we got married.
Okay. Um, Looking back now, I know you said that you were very like, what's that word you use? Like, it's like up and down. Like,
Tumultuous.
yes, you were tumultuous in your faith, and that those relationships as well. Like they were like that as well. Maybe not the one with Kathy, but the first one.
First one's a whole, you're young, you're immature.
Yeah.
There was just
But the
things.
second one, like, would you say that now you think, okay, this is where God wants me. This is like you're starting to feel that confirmation maybe from God, or where are you at with your kind of thoughts with God at this point? Now that you have Mac, you're getting married, are you starting to kind of feel like, I'm starting to do what God wants me to do, and like, are you having those kind of thoughts that
I don't know if I ever never thought I was. I was
no?
convinced I was a Christian. I was walking and I was convinced you make your mistakes and
Yeah, you're still caught up in that
uh,
legalism that we talked about at the beginning, right?
100%.
The
And
rules and checking off the boxes and
you ask for forgiveness, you make your mistakes, but again, still not bold in my faith. Like, um, and again, yeah, work. We're working a lot. We have a really good relationship, so we're spending a lot of time with each other. And Mac comes along, and we're loving being with Mac. And I never thought she would have children, and so Kath was super excited that we're gonna have kids together. And so we're balancing that. I still have my three boys in Sarnia, so she she didn't just take me on.
mhm.
She took like a really messy breakup and she took on 3 young boys.
Did you
Right
have
on
custody at the time?
what's that?
Did you have custody or were you sharing
No,
custody
I
or
was like, whenever I had weekends
yeah.
off, the boys were with us.
Okay.
So she took that on too, right? And again, it wasn't like a great breakup, so there was a lot of messy
Mhm.
stuff that she had to take on, and she did it gracefully and took on the boys, and so it was that balance. And again, as a Christian dad, I look back and I have a lot of regret at that because I'm excited to now be in a healthy relationship. We have a child together, and my other boys are without a dad. I'm not going to say an absent dad. Like I said, I had them as much as I could in my days off. We'd take them and spend them, but boys need a dad that lives with them.
Mhm.
Boys need a dad that teach them how to be young men and become young men and whatnot. And when you have them every other weekend, it's not about you don't have the way God designed a family to be. He designed them to be husband and wife together in a home and raising them to honor Him. And
Now, was
you know,
that a thought that you think you were actively struggling with at the time? Like,
not as much as now as I look back now. Yeah,
but it was there
it was
sometimes.
present and I was aware of it, but not aware of it enough to try to make a huge
Yeah.
difference in that, like I would now, and that I'm trying to do now with my children. But yeah, that's a huge, place of shame and guilt. And,
Mhm.
I miss those years for them. And it's hard to look back.
Yeah, for sure. So following these couple years, right? Like Parker and Mac have a 2-year gap. Is that right?
3.
3. Oh, right. You just told me that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
3.
Sorry. That's
It's
my bad.
okay. It's
Okay.
okay.
3-year gap.
Yeah.
So obviously, you said these next couple years, Kathy's taking on a lot, right? Like she's taking on the 2 boy or the 3 boys that you have, and then Mac, and you said you just came out of a breakup, and things were obviously heavy at the time, right? Um,
Heavy but light. Like
yeah,
she took everything in stride so
yeah,
well.
you were
Like,
pushing through, and
yeah.
this is kind of like not at this point, but a few years later is where I kind of start to come in the mix, and like
Mhm.
that's where I start to remember things a little bit. Like I met Mac at 7 years old, I think, is when we
Playing
started playing
hockey.
travel hockey,
Yeah.
right? And within the first couple years of your marriage and having those Mac, Parker, your three boys, and like, what's the next challenge that God kind of threw at you? Like,
We were attending church when we could,
hmm
but like as you know, sports started, hockey especially started. Look back now, and it was an idol.
yeah,
You know, it was a big part of our lives, obviously, which you got your weekends tournaments, you're missing church.
yeah,
We're still attending, and our faith is growing, but it's not growing the way it should. And the thing that kept us from was really connecting with the church at Emmanuel and the community there. And you need that.
mm,
If you're going to be a Christian, you got to connect to the Christian
yeah,
community for the support and the love. And just, it never happened there. And I think that was a big factor in just the faith not being able to fully grow to the capacity it should. And, you know, we would try to raise the boys in Christian values at night. You know, Cass would okay, come on in. We'd pray before the boys went to bed. And we'd have discussions about Christ and the stories, and we'd read to them. Cass would read to them too, and we both read to them the Bible stories. And we'd turn on the Christian movies and try to have a discussion about it afterwards. But at the same time, we'd go to the hockey tournaments and we'd hang with the parents, and we wouldn't indulge in everything, but we would still there was that not that clear we're Christians, right?
hmm
And you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I knew there was something different, but I didn't know you were Christians.
hmm
And I find that a shameful point now. You know, people should know. People should know what you stand for and what you believe in, and that Christ is everything in your life and the main point in your life, and it just wasn't that, right? And, same with at work, right? People would probably say, "Well, he believed in God, or he might have been a faithful," but still would partake in other things that weren't godly, right? And the policing world is the same as the sports world. Fitting in is hugely important. You gotta have each other's back. You gotta keep each other safe. You gotta trust everybody, right? And, I look back now, and it wasn't the guys at work that would mock it, or it's clearly Satan trying to tickle your ear and
hmm
go, "They will." If you fully live the life, they will. And I know great guys. There's Gabe Tatro, Steve Klustra, Mike Van Kesteren. I can name a number who were never mocked, walked their Christian walk and had great careers, right? But for some reason, it
The enemy's
started in
voice just got.
childhood. That enemy voice that
hmm
they're gonna mock you if you
Yep.
really say who you are and what you believe.
Yeah.
So that was still present during those times. It was just that not fully surrendered, not
I
fully
can't help
in.
but think of like, you know how they say like 80% or whatever the percent of things that we worry about don't actually happen, right?
100%.
And that's the devil trying to tell us these things are going to happen to
Yeah.
get us to fold, right?
And then we believe it, and then it became a stronghold, and it became such a stronghold in my life, that need to fit in.
hmm
And like, I heard recently, why would I worry about the opinions of others who crucified the one perfect man that walked this earth?
Yep.
Why would I worry about their opinion? You
I
know?
never thought about it like that.
And that just struck. I'm like, I needed to hear that a
Yeah.
long time ago because that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Like we're trying to satisfy a world that crucified a perfect man,
Mhm.
right? Like it's
100%.
never going to be, we're never going to be able to do it.
No.
Like it's just like when someone says, if God's so perfect and amazing and powerful, why doesn't he just come down here then? And it's like, well, he did, and we killed him.
Mhm.
Like we hung him on the cross.
That's right.
You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
So,
That's right.
um, with that challenge of trying to fit in at work, trying to fit in with the hockey parents, but also, trying to be that example for your kids and your wife, and obviously it would be for anybody, it would be like a extreme challenge to go back and forth, right? Um, at what point would you say that kinda, like, you had a crossroads where you're like, "I'm gonna have to kinda pick?" Like, was it obviously, like, I know because I've heard your testimony when it is, but how do we kinda get to there? You wanna kinda touch on that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Take your time, no
yeah, this
worries.
might be a hard
Yeah,
part.
no worries.
So like I said, for years it was a back and forth, and you know, I'd go to church. We'd say we were a Christian family. We had a really good relationship, but there were still those strongholds of sin that, you know, numerous times I tried to overcome, but I tried to overcome them on my own. And I know now the only way we'll really overcome them is to be in the Word and be in prayer consistently and be in a community that can support you. I didn't realize it then. I kept trying to do it at my own strength, and we just can't. You'll fail, and then you'll go back to whatever sin is holding, like the hockey idol as sin, and we'd come back into it. And there was shame that would come along with that as a father. Like I would push Mac and Parker, like in my mind, to be the best and give everything they could all the time, right? But at the same time, like if they didn't perform well, because when they perform well as a parent, you're proud. Look, that's my kid, right? And you perform well. But if they have a bad day or they just didn't put the effort in, right? And then your pride gets in the way, even as a parent. And that was a struggle and a stronghold. I'm just bringing up one of the
Yeah.
strongholds. It was a stronghold that, and then they reflected on Mac and Parker at times, right? Like, dad doesn't seem too happy right now. And the message I now know that gets sent by parents that do that is that your love or your joy is based on their achievement, right? And, again, that was present and hockey was we're so busy with it and chasing something that has no eternal value whatsoever. During those years, I coached all the soccer, baseball, hockey, and from a worldly standpoint, you would look and go, "What a great dad! What a great husband! He's so active in the kids." And I'm not taking that away. That it is a good thing to be involved with your kids. But when I look back now, I'm going like, what part of that had an eternal purpose, or what part really had a me purpose? Like, I'm coaching, I'm doing this for my kids, I'm a good
Push it back
husband, I'm
to,
a good
like,
dad, but I'm not a good Christian, I'm not a faithful follower. I'm doing this for me. Where's the eternal value in this? And that would creep up throughout those years, and it would come and it would go and take place. And so fast forward, our family is really involved with sports, particularly hockey. It's almost taken up a year-round thing, right? And Kath and I are both working. And she started just struggling physically with some things at work. It started at, I remember it started with a little tussle in the booking room when she ended up with what's called frozen shoulder, and it crippled her for a bit. And then,
a tussle as in, like, a fight or
yeah, yeah, a little wrestling match in the back with the prisoner. And then, so it turned out she had to get some x-rays and she had some pretty severe spinal things going on. Um,
like, from that in from
Not
the
from that in
okay.
particular, it was
It's
more
just
of a
that was what
genetic
brought
thing.
light to it?
That's what brought it up, like,
Okay.
exploring the frozen
Yeah.
shoulder and other aches and pains that she had going on. Um, and so she really started to suffer there. She was still working, and, she's so incredibly strong, like, she never let the boys know that she was hurting, like, she would still muster through. And that resulted in at least 2 spinal surgeries, I wanna say maybe 3, but over a span of a few years, she was going in, she was still working when she could, but off the road now and working when she could, and, but in a lot of pain and a lot of discomfort. She had
Is this at the time that, like, I'm playing hockey with McGuire and everything? Like, she's
Yeah,
getting had
that was
surgery and everything?
occurring. I
Yeah,
don't know
right.
if you even
Like,
remember,
yeah,
at one
like,
time she was wearing a neck brace after one of the spinal surgeries, probably at some of the games, but it would have been around
maybe I do.
maybe, yeah, it might have been around that time or just after you guys played hockey together. Um,
I just wanna point out, like, the part where you said, like, she was able to just muscle through everything and, like, not let everybody know that she was kind of going through pain and suffering is, like, I can totally see that because just, like, hearing that she had 3 spinal surgeries at the time that I knew her, like, I didn't know she had 1 spinal surgery. Like, maybe now I'm putting the dots together, seeing her with a neck brace once or twice in the stands, but
Mhm.
I don't think I ever a lot of times, if I had a friend whose parents, like, going through surgery or even diabetes or something, like, everybody knows about it, right? And they're all wearing pink tape and everything,
Yeah.
right? Like, she was just a warrior that
She never wanted
yeah.
attention ever, and she didn't want boys to ever see
Yeah.
weakness
I just thought
in
I'd
her.
point that out because I just kinda connected those dots now, like, you would think that someone like, knowing somebody for my whole life up until this point, like, if they had 3 3 back surgeries, that's a big deal, like, you would know, right? But, no,
Mhm.
she was able to,
She's very
like
private.
yeah,
Yeah, she didn't want people to know things.
interesting, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, and, so, yeah, through the several years of dealing with spinal things and never really ever fully getting a recovery from the
Yeah.
pain that was going on, um, yeah, I was still policing, and then I had joined, a team that, um I was seconded to the OPP to travel. There was a traveling team that traveled the province to work on specific investigations. So I was away from home, but she encouraged me to do it. She's like, "Get out! Like it'll be, something different, something you'll enjoy." And
She had that to her, right? Like, she always wanted to push you to go make
100%,
your best,
uh,
right?
always encouragement, always encouragement. And it was weird going to a relationship that was tumultuous, and then going to one. I can't even think of an argument in the years that we were together. Really. Um, yeah. So just encouraging to go on this team, and she was still working through the spinal things, and we're still heavily involved in hockey and still attending church, but not like engulfed in church. Still, I'm a Christian. We're a Christian. We're good. But still, it was when I was with that team actually where I really started. Now it's coming to me. I'm like, I was praying. I'm like, all my prayers were centered around me and my walk with Him. And it's not a great place when you don't feel you can fully pray for others.
Mhm.
Right? Where you're like, you're in a good place with God. Now you can start praying for others. And I just thought, why am I continually praying about my walk? Why does this continue to happen? And one scripture that kept coming up for the number of years that when I was like, when Cath, we were really trying, I was trying to figure out Christianity. Really, I wanted to have my walk firm. I didn't want to be any more half in the world, half out. Like it was that constant struggle. And you familiar with the parable of the sower?
Heard of it. I think you touched on it in your testimony, the breakfast.
Yeah,
Could you just revisit it for me?
sure. So it's in different Matthew 13, I would say, was probably the most detailed, describes it. But it talks just the sower is walking and throwing seed, and some of the seed goes to the just off to the ground, off to the side, and some of the seed falls on a rocky area, some falls on soil, and some falls on the good soil. And Jesus later explains that the seed that fell, I won't be able to do it perfectly, but um, the seed that fell to the side, just in the seed's the word of God,
Mhm.
and it's quickly eaten up by the devil. Like it doesn't take root, nothing happens. Like it's quickly taken away. And then the seed that falls in the rock, it grows. There's a joy, immediate joy, but because it's in the rock, it can never firmly, deeply root. And anytime persecution or affliction comes because of the word of God or the Christian walk, it goes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then the next one that fell in the thorny area, it gets swallowed up by thorns, is how it's described. It starts to grow. There's a growth there, but it gets swallowed by thorns. And that Jesus later on describes it's swallowed up because of the worries of the world or the chasing of riches or other things, the distractions we talked about.
Mhm.
Um, and it never firmly roots and is no fruit is is bred as a result of that seed. And then the last seed that falls in the good soil, that's the one. That's the one that grows and fruit comes. And even talks about the fruit. It's sometimes a little fruit, sometimes there's a lot of fruit, but there's fruit.
Mhm.
And for those years I would wrestle with that parable because I'm like, which one am I? I'm like, part of me feels like I'm the one in the rock. Part of me feels I'm the one in the thorn. But what should have really been asking, why am I not the one in the good soils with the fruit?
How do I get there?
And I kept going, God kept bringing me back to that parable. And I kept struggling with it because I'm struggling with it. Okay, are you still a Christian if you're in the rock? Or are you still a Christian if you're in the root? And people will debate that, and I'm not here
Mhm.
for a theology debate, but for me, I'm like, I don't think I was. I don't think I wasn't fully surrendered. Like, I wasn't, declaring him without being ashamed, you know?
Yeah.
And so that parable was taking place a lot during those, especially those last years when I'm joining that team, and then that everything. I'm praying for it specifically that year. I'm like gonna get emotional probably. So,
Okay.
um, I'm praying. I want to get closer to God. I want to really know Him. So I'm working in Toronto in December. It's 2021. And we're doing a project there and we're just finishing up. So 17th, we're finishing up, December 17th. And that night, we're just having like kind of a Christmas gathering with the team before we all go back home for Christmas holidays or whatever. I just remember sitting there that night. I'm like, and I had talked to Kath on the phone and I was debating whether to come home that night or because again, I'm like, it's a great team. We're going to sit around, have a few drinks and socialize. And my heart, you just no more of this. Go home. And I didn't. And then the next morning, I remember walking in the lobby and some of them are having breakfast and they're like, hey, sit down and have breakfast. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I got to get home. Something's up. So I called, I
Okay.
called Kath. She's like, I think I have strep throat. And she's like, I'm just going to go to Merge and get it checked out. I'm like, knowing her and her toughness, I'm like, she does not go to Emerge for strep throat, right? And a couple months before that, something strange happened. She woke up after sleeping the one night, and she woke up like with this big bruised eye and welt, and like looked deformed almost. It looked like someone really like Mike Tyson gave her a good shot. It was just weird, like, it came out of nowhere,
Yeah. Unexplainable.
and we couldn't explain it, and then it went away, and she didn't think anything of it, and didn't follow it up, and then the strep throat, and so she's like, "I'm going to Merge," and I'm driving home, so I'm like, "Okay, I'll meet you at the hospital." So, I went straight to the hospital when I got home and walked in the room, I could tell in her face that something wasn't right. She's like, "They think I got cancer. I think I have, leukemia." And, it was a whirlwind from there, Logan. It was like, so everyone's kind of rushing around. They said, they couldn't believe she drove there. They're like, how'd you get here? Because based on her blood work, she should like hardly be walking at the time. And again, um, and then they're like, we think you have, it's a type of leukemia called AML, which is a like highly aggressive leukemia. Um, like, but we're going to send you to London to confirm. So it's evening by now at the hospital, like Mac and Parker are at home. I'm trying to like get them looked after, get Kath looked after. And so it was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock that night. And she's like, go home, get the boys, and then come down to London tomorrow or whatever. So then, and this was kind of around COVID was going on. It was a nightmare dealing with that in the hospital, even visiting at the hospital. Um, and she went to London. It was confirmed she had AML type of leukemia. And they're like, it had already taken up such a huge part of her body that they're like, we have to aggressively like hit this now with chemo. Um, so again, December 18th, we're just before Christmas. The boys are still young. Kath always made it Christmas a really big deal. Um, so so yeah, she was diagnosed. They started the chemo pretty much immediately, and she was there for 43 days straight in the hospital. So 1 minute we're working, I'm working, she's got some spinal stuff going on, but we're getting through it. And then life literally came to a halt.
Next moment, everything's
It's like,
done.
and so I'm like, "Okay, tell the team I'm done for now." Um, they were so good about it, so good about it, so kind. Work in Chatham, Kent was awesome about it. Obviously, Kath was still working there. Um, and then, so she's in London. The boys are here, so it's the balancing act we try, and they're still young. The balancing act trying to make sure they're looked after, and we had some friends that stepped up, thankfully, and then actually, sorry, I should backtrack a bit low before that. Um, so fa rewind a little bit. My mom and dad had moved from Woodstock to Chatham several years before. Um I wanna touch on my mom. I didn't touch on her at the beginning of my childhood, but we have a really close relationship, and she's been a faithful prayer warrior for years. So the whole time I'm going through everything, she's watching me go through my up and down with Christianity, and she's faithfully praying, never stopped. The way we were just so supported during that time. Like, even me getting on the team I did with the OPP near the end there, they showed up one day with meals and gift cards, you know, and the CK police showed up with things for us. And at the time when I left work, I had some vacation time I was using up, bank time I was using up. Um, Mike Van Kesteren was really good at reaching out frequently during this time. And then Maple City showed up. And like I said, we hadn't even really connected yet. But these meals are showing up at these opportune times when we need them. These gas cards, like when I'm like, or financially, like, because I'm at London every day during the day, and I'm home at night with the boys every day. That was what we had gone to, and it's incredible when you're busy planning retirement, you're busy planning activities, vacations, and everything's being planned, and then your world comes to a halt. I'm not working anymore. You're just now it's just life and death, and you're fighting for it. And that's what it became. But at the same time, God was there. And like I had just said, like I've been praying the year before, I want to know you. I want to get closer to you. I don't want to play this game anymore of my version of Christianity versus what you designed it to be. And life comes to a halt. So some deep conversations started taking place, right? And like deep conversations with God, deep conversations with Kat, the boys. And Maple City just kept showing up, like, just kept showing up, people I don't know with meals and gift cards and whatnot.
God just kept inserting people into your life, right?
Mhm. It was just he was pouring in this love, and like I said, from the team, like, that I was on, just happened to get on, and then from the police here that I had worked so many years with, and then they really came through. My time was coming to an end, my bank time, my vacation time, everything. And a bunch of my coworkers, well, Kath and I, both our coworkers here from CK, just flooded me with a bunch of hours and filled up my bank so I could stay up to look after her and the family. And it just God was providing despite the storm and the uncertainties. And he was present, and it gave Cass some really good time, alone time with God too. And she would say we're having a lot of conversations these days. And her big concern was the boys. What happens if I go and me? And it was a battle. It was a battle. So she was diagnosed with AML, leukemia, which is, and we're repeatedly told, like, usually it's a pretty bad diagnosis. Your chance of survival is very slim. So they had talked about stem cell transplant, and then amidst it, I think we were like 3 months in, they do a full body scan to see where the cancer is and everything. And then they find out Kath has kidney cancer on top of us. Mm. The doctors had never heard of that. She's like, all right, what do I got to do first? Because you can't do a stem cell transplant if you have other types of cancers in your body. I'm like, why? You know, and they're like, okay, we're going to remove the kidney. So amidst this, after she does her chemo, she comes home for a bit. Then we find out about the kidney can. I can't keep it all together because it's such a blur.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go down to London and they had to do the cancer surgery and remove her kidney. And then we're waiting to see if we can find a donor for a stem cell transplant, and praying about that. And it was just, you know, um, so they get rid of the kidney. And every time she's home, she's just trying to put on a face for the boys. She'd sit in the living room, act like everything's okay, and then just buckle over in the bedroom and close the door so they couldn't see it. Um, but God was present and kept showing up. And I wish I wrote a book of all the times, like the circumstances that would
Yeah.
take place. It could only be Him, you know. And in the meantime, the boys started making connections here at the church, and more so later. But they were starting to make some connections here, and they were just loving on our family, and we hardly knew them. Like, we hadn't been here that long. And then Kath had a stem cell transplant. And we thought, like, with the stem cell transplant, the doctor who was the specialist in that area thought the prognosis would be really good. Um, and usually when you come, like, we almost lost her a couple times. She had to go to Toronto for that. Almost lost her a couple times through that process. It's a brutal process to go through for this type. There's different types of stem cell transplants, but this in particular, because it was a blood bone cancer, it's very different. And then we got her home and they're like, expect, like, you're going to probably get ill and end up in the hospital for a few stays, but that's normal. And for the first few months, she didn't. We thought she was home for Christmas for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
The excitement with that. And then after Christmas, early 2023, she was starting to have lung difficulties and breathing. And the one morning I went up in bed and she couldn't breathe. And she was trying to catch her air and she couldn't figure out what was wrong. And like, okay, we got to get you in the hospital. And this was a trying time because at the same time, my mother had had hip surgery and got a bad infection. So she's sick. And she's supposed to have emergency surgery the next day. My dad's now passed away. So we're looking after mom and Cass in the hospital, and they put her in ICU in Chatham. And then mom ended up down the hall at the same time fighting this infection. It was just,
Wow.
all we had. It's like all I had was God to rely on. We think we control so much around us, and we control nothing. We really do. And we wanna control everything, but we don't. And at that moment, there's no controlling anything. He's the only one in control. So, Cass struggling in the hospital, nothing's getting done. COVID's going on. They suggest she had COVID. Um, so they wouldn't transfer her to London because they didn't wanna so we couldn't get to the care she needed to get. And she sat in the Chatham Hospital with nothing being done for several weeks. So we could finally, and each time her lungs are failing more and more, and her breathing, she's starting to struggle more and more, and they can't identify what the issue is because it's not cancer related. Well, it is, but it's not, right? It's not a cancer in her lungs. So I'll finally fight and get her to London, and, h her breathing's still going down, and she's in ICU there. We're praying. Sometimes the answer is no. We told ourselves at the beginning of our diagnosis we wouldn't get angry with God, and we kept that promise. We didn't, because He was still loving despite. And eventually, it was like, we have to put a ventilator on her. Her breathing's going to stop, and we hope the ventilator will like give her time to recoup and heal. And but we both knew most time when people get a ventilator put on, they're not coming off it. So it was kind of a goodbye. I remember telling her just to talk to Jesus. She was on the ventilator probably a week, so I'd go every day and just try to talk to. I'm talking to her, hoping she's hearing me. But I left the Sunday after our visit. I was there for the day. The boys were playing hockey with the church that night. I'm like 3/4 of the way home, and my phone rings. It's the hospital. They're like, "You got to come back." So I'm like wrestling with, do I grab Mac and Parker? And so I did. Went to the arena. I'm like, guys, we gotta come. We gotta go. So we get to the hospital. Cat passed away short. Like, she's pretty much gone when we got there, but officially it passed. It's now March 20th, 2023. And just seeing that devastation, trying to explain it to the boys and praying together. Um, and you know what? God showed up again. And we walk out, and there's Pastor Rick, Pastor Dan, Pastor Andrew, and they're all in the hospital, and they're all in ICU, and they're wrapping us up in one. And God just started weaving right from He had always been all my life, but He just started weaving there, and then and life's forever changed. And you're trying to deal with your own grief, trying to hold it together for the boys. I'm trying to be strong for the boys, like their mom, and the church was so good, and God weaved, started weaving.
I can't imagine, and I know that must be hard to visit that. So I appreciate you being honest and being willing to share that. For the listener, if there's a listener right now that is maybe in those exact shoes right now, if there was something like that you would want them to know, like what would it be? Or something that maybe you wish somebody would have told you in that moment that maybe could have confirmed it for you, or like really just gave you that little nudge that you needed.
One thing I learned in those periods, nothing that anyone's going to say will ever really make it
Exactly
right.
right.
And people try, and I can appreciate that, and I did appreciate it, but nothing's going to really strike at that time. And sometimes silence is best and just being there. Um, and be aware that sometimes you're praying for something to God, and how you think He's going to answer it is not at all how He's going to answer it. And my prayer to get closer to Him, you know, was a whole thing I did not expect. And it came with a lot of pain and a lot of struggle, and clearly lessons I needed to learn. And as a husband, and as a father, but he was present.
Mhm.
And if you really look for him, he'll be there. And if you choose to get angry and bitter, which I'm glad we chose right off the bat, that we both said we're not getting angry. We all have a day. And some of us walk around thinking we don't, but we do. In this case, it came just with a diagnosis
Mhm.
and an unexpected one. But he's present. And at that moment, everything else fades. That's the only thing you have to rely on is God. That's it. And if you think you have other things, or if you let bitterness creep in or anger, it's not going to feed anything. And if I had allowed it to feed in, I wouldn't have been good for the boys, and I wouldn't have been present for them. And that's all you got is him. And it was that rely, and it's okay to question him. He expects it. He expects us to question him. Um, but it's with the purpose of and sometimes we won't get the answer now,
Yeah.
right? But there was mercy, and he
Mhm.
brought peace, and he brought, he saw me through it. The grieving period, there was good times where I felt at peace, and other times where I absolutely destroyed, and again, not honoring God in my grief.
Mhm.
But he knows it.
Yeah.
He sent Jesus to walk this earth. He's felt all the emotions we're gonna feel. So just don't lose hope, Christ. Like that's the anchor. That's how you're gonna get back above the water despite the storm. And he saw me through. The story wasn't done. There's a lot
Yeah.
more to be said, but
Yeah. Obviously, you shared with the McCombs and just the way God was weaving the whole time,
mm,
but especially after Kathy's passing and the way that the McCombs took in, like, just started caring for Mac and Parker and like all these things started happening. I know you touched on that being one of them, but were there any like particular other ways that come to mind right away when you think of, like, how God surprised you through these next little while? Like, things that you would have, like, not expected in the least started happening, and maybe they were exactly what you needed or you know what I mean?
yeah. So yeah, it's little pieces since Cass passing to now. So we're 2023 to now, and there's so many different weaving stories in
Yeah.
there. Um, but shortly, we'll go through the story. Maybe we'll jump to like later on after we go through the grieving period and
Mm,
um the boys' growth with Andrew Stace, and Rick was meeting me frequently, and Pastor Dan had inserted himself too with love, and then Tara and the family, and we definitely started to grow more of the community here and feeling Christ more in my life, and like all the things I was concerned about before, like little things I would get worked up about in life, like we all do, and like stupid little things and stuff like that. None of that mattered anymore, and it still doesn't. You really begin to like recognize what's important and what's not. Um, yeah, there's just a constant weaving, but fast forward a bit, like after a good amount of time, I met someone else, and we started into a relationship, and some of my old patterns, I guess, started to surface. It wasn't really starting an honoring relationship. I was grieving and not making, and yeah, just old patterns and I met Erica. Um, we started seeing each other. Um, Sounds terrible going from that to that, but there's a period of time in
mhm.
between that's just me alone trying to
Yeah.
figure things out, and trying to spend time with the boys and figuring out the grief, but
Yeah.
kind of just into my faith journey. It's important to add this because I was really struggling with how I was starting that relationship, um, and then there's a reason why the Bible talks about not being unequally yoked. Erica at the time was not a Christian, and you know, I think falling back on my old ways, convinced myself I had been through so much. I deserve love. I deserve something good to happen to me.
A little
And
bit of grace for yourself.
yeah, you know, but at the same time, that's again that voice in the ear saying, you deserve, you deserve. And really, I deserve nothing. But I started, looking that direction. And obviously, it was a struggle with the boys. Seeing a new dad in a new relationship and whatnot, and I'm navigating that and just falling in some of my own ways, and then shortly after, you know, we're budding. It's a good relationship. We get along super well. She's a beautiful lady, and I'm feeling God brought her in my life, but at the same time, I'm like, she's not a Christian. You know, am I convincing myself that God brought her in my life? Because I want that, because
Mhm.
I enjoy being with her and she's helping me out of this dark hole I'm in, and I feel like I'm living a bit again, and, and everything's going great. And then she gets diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
And so she gets diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm like, God, what are you trying to tell me? And I knew we had started out not in an God honoring relationship, and I'm starting out with a non-Christian again, and those same compromises and everything. And like in my mind, like by this time, there's a deep rooted. I love her now. I'm care for her, but at the same time, I was struggling with like, do I have to end this relationship because we're not in faith together, and it's going to bring me back into some of my old patterns. And then the cancer diagnosis comes, the breast cancer diagnosis comes, and she, in her grace, is like, I don't want you to go through this again. And she was almost talking about like dissolving the relationship, and I'm like, no, you know, I'm like, maybe I walked all that because I can walk it with you. Who better to walk it with? And that's partially true, but
Mm.
I know now that wasn't the full reason
Yeah.
why. Um, but I knew there's no way I'm walking out now. She's got to walk this journey, and go through the chemo and surgeries and stuff like that. And I care deeply for her, and I'm like, God, I don't know. Like, part of me is like, I know this wasn't an honoring relationship to start, but she had started to ask faith questions, and that started to develop
The door opened a
already. And
little bit, right?
there was like something unexpected happening there in her life. That was not forced by me, but brought on by her and made me like start digging deeper into the word for the answers. Um, And I didn't get into great detail with her. I'm like trying to be strong for her and stuff like that. But when we went to London, and I'm back at the London Cancer Clinic again,
Wow, Jim.
and I'm in the consult room again, and God's presence was so strong there. And I couldn't help go, you didn't learn your lesson. You're there, you're this close, but you didn't learn your lesson. And I'm not saying he was punishing me, but in his love, he was bringing me back to a place I needed to go. And I walked by the room, on the other side of the doors where Kath had passed away. And I'm just like, my heart's sinking. And then I'm thinking of Eric, and I'm like, what if I lose her now? You know? And it was from that moment, okay, you know, enough. Okay, God, I get it. I get it. And he brought me another parable. And it's a parable that's, I want to say Luke 18, but it's about a vineyard owner. He goes to his vineyard, and there's a fig tree that was planted there, and he's going there to find fruit on it. And he's mad because there's no fruit. And he's like, I've come here 3 years, and there's no fruit on this fig tree. And he tells the vineyard keeper, cut it down, get rid of it. It's a waste of space, basically. Burn this. And the vineyard keeper's like, well, give me it one more year. Let me fertilize it. Let me dig around this tree. Just give it another year. And if it doesn't produce fruit, then I'll cut it down. And I just picture God, the vineyard owner, and Jesus and his grace going, give me one more chance with this. Let me fertilize it. Let me love it. Let me teach it, admonish it. I'm like, okay, I get it. That's me. That's me. I can't go another year and not produce fruit. And not only that, like when you think about it, the fig tree I researched after I would dove deeper. How long does it take to produce fruit after you plant it? And it's like 2 to 3 years to produce fruit. So I'm like, this vineyard owner was not only waiting for these 3 years he came to serve, but he had been planted at 3 years anticipating it. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that's me. That's me. So it was from that moment that, everything turned. Eric and I were really delving in the word, and she joined the ladies' Bible study at Maple City on her own. She wanted to connect more. And the questions she had made me dig in the word more. Um, and we're fighting the cancer together and everything. We like purified our relationship. We're stopping dishonoring God, you know. And by the grace of God, she's through the chemo, the surgeries, and came through. And that's a whole nother story
Praise
on its
God.
own, how we saw it through. And she's doing well, and she became saved, and not
Yeah, didn't my next question was that, like, wasn't
yeah.
she baptized into Maple City, like,
She
pretty, like, soon before, or not, like, soon, like, pretty close to, like, the same time as me, like, not too
yeah,
far
yeah, it
before,
wasn't too
right?
far apart
Yeah.
from you, the
I
two
think
of
I
you.
remember I think I might have already been attending, but I don't think was it past October or not yet, maybe?
Oh, geez, you're gonna ask me on the date.
No, okay, I won't
Yeah,
ask you the date, but, like,
but
I do remember that being, like, pretty
yeah,
fresh when I started coming around.
100%. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was very fresh,
yeah.
and we would read together, do devotions together in the morning. She wasn't saved yet, and she just had questions, and she was like, she's a very bright lady, and her family very much into science, and so she really wanted to learn,
Uh-huh.
and she had great questions. And I would, often go, "Where are you now?" In the faith, kind of like, and we would talk about like belief and repentance, and she goes, "Yeah, I'm still learning. I'm still." And I'll never forget because we laughed about it afterwards. Doing a morning reading like we do at morning and pray together. And I'm like, "So where you at with things?" And she goes, "Oh, like I had that conversation with God last week." I'm like, "What conversation?" I said, "Well, I repented. I believe in him." I'm like, "Last week you didn't tell me about this?" She goes, "Well, I thought it was a personal thing between me and God."
I bet you were jumping for joy, weren't you?
Well, the thing that confirmed Logan, because of the fear in something like that, is you worry about when you're in that unyoked relationship and you're on that cusp, like, as much as I care for you and love you, we might not be able to stay together if we're both not in the faith, because that just causes difficulty.
Mhm.
But you never want the other person to come to faith because they want the relationship
Yeah, you want it to be for their own self,
for
right?
their own self. And the fact that she didn't tell me for a week
Proved it.
answered that whole question, that it was for her and it was between her and God. So that was a beautiful, beautiful
Oh,
moment.
praise the Lord.
So as a result of everything that had, Erica gets saved in the process. And so just on God's weaving, and I'll touch a little bit, man. So since then, we've been like, I want no more wasted days.
Yeah.
I want everything that we try to do to have an eternal purpose based on it. But so after Cass passed, and Eric and I got married, like after the chemo and the surgeries and stuff, several months later, we wanted to do everything right. I mean, when she moved to Chatham from Niagara, she bought her own house and we lived separately and we built our relationship in an honoring way, which felt so much better. It's so much different when you're at peace with God in your walk. And remember, so after Kath passed away, obviously we're grieving, we're struggling, and Parker was struggling, and Mac was in a different relationship at that time. So, and he was with Andrew. So he almost felt he was in a better space, but he might not have been. But you know, looking back, he might have needed Dad more.
Mhm.
But Parker, I was concerned with. So I'm like, and he wasn't, you know, Christian, but he was struggling, but he was quiet about it. And I'm like, hockey's his world. So how can I find like a faith-based
Mhm.
hockey program?
Yeah.
And somehow I find this hockey camp in Minnesota run by, there's a Christian high school there, like hockey Christian school there, and they're running a camp and it's with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I'm like, I just randomly go, Park, we're going, you're going to that camp. And who's hesitant about it? It was, you stay overnight with all the kids. He's never done that before. I'm like, we're just going. Dad'll stay. I'll come watch every day, but we're going to do this together. He's like, okay. So he goes. There's a ex NHLer, Tim Jackman, who's one of the guys running the camp, and we get talking. We get talking about what recently happened and the loss of Parker's mom and loss of Kath, and we connect really well there, right? And their headquarters, Fellowship Christian Athlete headquarters, is in Minnesota at the time. So fast forward the next summer, Tim contacts me and wants Parker to play for Fellowship Christian Athletes a hockey tournament in Boston, and Parker doesn't want to go. So like, all right, sorry, Tim, he doesn't want to go this year. He's like, okay, well, let's keep him in mind. Maybe next year he'll be up to it. That fall, Mac, after being with Andrew and Stacy for so long, who both Liberty graduates, had convinced him that maybe he had done a year at Windsor U, but maybe Liberty would be a good place to go. So he's going to a prospect skate in the fall. We get down there and I see one of the other guys, Aaron Rendozo, who is also part of Fellowship of Christian Athletes in the school in Minnesota, is walking on the campus on Liberty. I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And they're from the Minnesota camp that Parker went to. He's like, oh, we just relocated. Our new headquarters is here at Liberty now. We just relocated from Minnesota
Really?
to
Wow.
Liberty. I'm like, no way. I'm like, Mac really needs to connect with you guys. He goes, yeah, if we get that opportunity, we will. And no what connection had been made yet. Tim Jackman calls me up the following year. He's like, hey, Parker interested in playing. Tim does not know McGuire yet.
Yeah.
He's at the university, but he doesn't know him yet. So so he calls up about Parker playing again, and Parker goes and plays this time in Boston. And it's a great week of fellowship and whatnot. And then Tim starts talking about, hey, I like to mentor some of the hockey players at Liberty. I like to meet them for coffee or whatnot. I'm like, oh, that's great. You should connect with Mac down there. He plays hockey. And then Tim goes on and goes, I meet frequently with this guy named Aiden Hannigan. And he goes, we'll go out for coffee and get together. I'm like, that's Mac's roommate. That's one of his best buds.
No, like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's like, no way. So fast forward a little bit, Tim and Mac connect. They hit it off really well. And today, Mac is interning with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Aiden's interning there, and Mac's now girlfriend is interning there.
Praise the Lord. Wow.
And it's just started with that connection in Minnesota. It started with Andrew and Stacy and their connection to Liberty. And
It's
then
crazy what God will do.
the
Like,
hockey camp. And there's so many stories of that and so many things weaved. And I can go on about like just how Eric and I met and God weaved that too. She was briefly on the team with OPP and we crossed paths a little bit. Didn't know, like, she knew I left the team because my wife was sick and then didn't know she had passed. And then just happened to make a random phone call when she found out because a coworker had met up with her and told her about it just to offer her condolences. And it was just that connection was already being weaved, and then she gets saved, and so much has gone on there. But I just use this phrase now. I don't want any more wasted days.
it's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
I love the analogy you made about the sower, or is that what it was? The sower, where he's like, let's just chop it down. And God's like, or Jesus is like, just give me one more season and one more try. And like the part where you said, like you actively had that realization that like you're the tree and like you're about to be chopped down if you don't like
He's
produce
given
the
me
fruit,
how
right?
many years to
Exactly.
bear fruit.
I've never thought of it that way. And like that was just,
Uh,
that was a really good way to put it, man. So yeah, like that is just evidence like God is real. And
that's been present.
Yeah. And I personally can relate to you. Not I like I don't have nearly as many like situations like that, but likewise, when I went to Liberty and even just my first couple months of being saved, like the things that were taking place in my life were so crazy to me that like I had a journal and I was writing them down going for them so that I wouldn't, because it was so shocking. There was too many to remember of like there's no way that that just happened unless God did that, right? So, and especially like for example being up at Liberty with Mac, going out for breakfast and then going to watch his girlfriend play hockey after. Um, we're just sitting at breakfast and we're saying a prayer, and from across the restaurant, somebody like we praying out loud, and like that was new to me. Like
Mhm,
I didn't
mhm,
pray out loud in public. And then from across the restaurant, somebody yells, "Amen." And then we all like smile, and that's just a little connection that starts, right? And then I start eating. The guy comes over, asks if he can pray for me. And like he doesn't know that I'm a week into being saved. And
mhm.
he's like saying all these things that are exactly what I need to hear. And then like that's just one of like 15 things that happened that day. Like and but yeah, it's just crazy to see like what happens when we fully like I guess could you say get off that fence probably and fully surrender to it,
Surrender,
right? Yeah.
surrender, pick up your cross and follow.
And like the Bible tells us every day we are called as Christians to pick up our cross, right? And for me, like I didn't know that that meant pick up our cross means, you know, deny our flesh every single day. Like instead of doing what we want to do or what the world wants us to do, like do what Christ wants and honor Christ, right? And we have to do that every day, right?
But on that note, people thinks it's to take away pleasure and joy, but it's to save you from pain and
Suffering.
regret and shame and death.
Hmm.
Like,
We think it's what we want,
we think it's what it
but we're
wants, but if
deceived.
you had deep conversations with people that have
Done that?
done it, like, "Nah, it didn't bring me the joy I
Hmm.
thought it would." And there's only one place you're gonna find joy
Christ.
and fulfillment, and that's Christ.
Yeah.
And anything except from that, and like I said, when you're left and you're cleaning out the closet of the loved one, and all you have is those memories, only thing that matters is what happens eternally now. Everything else collects dust. The only
Yes.
thing that it'll be is that relationship and where your destiny is eternally, you know?
I can't help but think of, like, you know, like Revelation, the end of Revelation, like in that moment where everybody that's living for the world, everything that they put their pride and value and joy in is all going to come to nothing in seconds, right? And the
It
only thing
does.
that's going to matter is where you stand with God.
100%.
So, and
100%.
I think I often let that get like I lose thought of that, but it's something that we should be keeping in the forefront, right? Um,
Well, when you go with a loved one who goes through what Kath went through and passes away, you can't help but say, "Go, my day will come," and we're all going to stand before him. And he's either going to go, "Job well done, my good or faithful servant,"
all right, I
or
never knew
"Away
you.
from me, I never knew you." And I can't help but think in all those years where I kept claiming I was a Christian, we didn't know each other. And I'm not wasting any more days.
Amen. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on, man. That was a beautiful story, and I just want to thank you for being honest with me, with the people, and just letting God work through you. I truly believe, like we talked off air about it, but I truly believe there's so much power in our stories, our testimonies, and um, it's not about us though. It's not about you know what we did, what we went through, and how we got through it, right? It's about how God stayed patient with us and how even though, you know, I was living in rebellion and maybe you were, you know, half in and half out for so long and we don't deserve the grace, but he gives it to us, right?
Mm.
And that's what it's about. And you know that for me, hearing somebody's testimony was what kind of sparked my want to know Christ. It sparked it for me. It's like and ironically, it was with your son. So, I think that, like, I don't think that something I say will give somebody Jesus, but I think that if there's something that I can say or you can say just to that would help somebody to
Plant the
draw a
seed.
connection, right? That maybe they hadn't thought about before, or because honestly, I don't know if I didn't hear that testimony that night, I don't know where I would be right now, right?
Mm,
That was what encouraged me to reach out, to start asking questions, to fully end up surrendering my life to God. But
100%.
yeah, I just think that being honest and sharing your story, even when it's difficult, like obviously you've been through a lot and it's difficult to visit, but again, I just thank you because I know that there is somebody out there that's just waiting to relate to it, right?
100%.
So
And remember, like in the midst of suffering, you can hit the lowest of low. And, I'm sure people have hit lower than me, but it's pretty deep when you lose your best friend and the one you love. But God was gracious. And I never saw him giving me another great love like Erica. And she challenges me to get in the word every day and enjoy that. Put a relationship where you put him first.
100%.
Like you start your morning and you put him first and you pray together about everything. And there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, can't go wrong,
You
right?
can't go wrong. And God, like you said, I didn't deserve it. My life and my past would say I deserve nothing. But yet, for some reason, he loved me enough to bring me that gift,
By His grace, right?
look after the boys and put them in places and with families and love where they're growing in their faith. It's just, he's a good God.
Praise the Lord,
And
man.
it's sometimes it'll start in the depth of suffering.
100%. I know we talked about Him always
Mhm.
weaving in your life,
Mhm.
and like, how did you start to see Him like start working in surprising ways after like you're faced with this extremely difficult time, right?
So it started in the diagnosis in
Yeah.
2021. I think I touched on like that year was prior leading up to that was just this really drawing to like, are you finally going to come to me?
Mhm.
Are you finally going to have the life that I have for you? And I was praying for it. I was praying, God, I do want a closer life with you. I don't want a life of compromise anymore. I don't want to be concerned about what other people think. I want to be bold. Like my concern should be for the people that I'm concerned are going to judge me, that they're lost. That should be my concern. That they need to know you too, right? And if they shun it, okay, but at least it's spoken to them
Mhm.
and they're given the opportunity to know
At
Jesus.
least I obeyed you and did what I was
100%.
called to do, right?
100%. And because I love them. If I'm concerned for them, I should love them.
Mhm.
And I definitely should not want them to be lost at the end of their lives or walking thinking they're good and they're going to pass and they're going to be in heaven,
Yeah.
and knowing the answer to that. And then the diagnosis came, and like I explained, all right, like everything was stripped. Work was stripped, future plans were stripped. Only one thing mattered now was keeping the boys afloat and Kathy surviving this diagnosis, you know, and us being able to balance our lives. That's all that mattered. Like nothing else mattered was her getting through this and us all surviving it together. And, you know, it hurts to know that it ultimately had to come to that place. But God loved us enough to bring us there. And during that time, like Kath grew so much. She had many times because of COVID or how susceptible she was to infections that no one could be around her besides
Mhm.
hospital staff. So she had, like she said, many conversations with God during those quiet times. And he was bringing her to a place,
Yeah.
you know, and at the same time, he was bringing me to a place. And, he was answering my prayer and bringing me closer to him through this pain and the suffering that was taking place. Sometimes it takes us to hit that. And I know in your life you've had those rock bottom moments
Yeah.
where the only place you can do now is look up. And it was that we started recognizing the value, what really matters in life.
Yeah.
Not all the little things, not the plans for the future, what really matters.
Everything that you thought was like important is pretty much nothing, right?
Hmm. And he took it, but he took it out of love.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have no regret. Kath and I said, we're not going to be angry with God. Like, we all have a day.
Yeah.
We all have a number. Some unfortunately come sooner than others, and that
100%.
causes hurt and pain. But it's not because God doesn't love us.
For sure.
And people can't argue, how does a good God let things like that happen? That same people that don't understand, he sent his son. He sent his son knowing he was coming to save us
Mm-hmm.
and bear our sins, all of it. And at one moment, he had to turn his face from his son because he couldn't look at the sin in the world. But the pain and the suffering and everything he went through, that is a good God. And he did it for us. So no one knows pain and suffering more than God.
Praise the Lord. Amen.
You know, so the fact that we had to walk it, you know, we had to walk it, and it was a painful, and still is, clearly, as you're going to see on the video.
Yeah, this obviously would be like a challenging time for not only you for like your own sake, but for just to be an example for your boys, for um even just like that fear of opinions of other people, right? I know you said like you realized in that moment that like none of that really matters, right? But deep down, you still have like you're still a father for your boys. You're still like you still have all these responsibilities in life, right? And everything else all of a sudden, not only does it not really matter as much except for these things, but these things all of a sudden become so much more heavier and meaningful, right? Your boys are suddenly pulled right close to you, or maybe did you experience the opposite? Was there like a little wedge put in
Actually,
between there?
you're hitting on a really great point. You're bringing some stuff to mind that, like, that I wasn't even thinking about. But I remember in that time, you know, going, this is your opportunity to be an example, like, specifically for my young boys, of how to love their mom. You know, how to put yourself, like, because during that time, like, literally I had to put everything self aside. You know, like, all my days were spent either in London or Toronto, and my evenings were trying to, like, make sure the boys were good and the
Mm-hmm.
boys were looked after. And, you know, and God was present during that time, like I said, with people from the church or people from work. And Mac was in a different relationship at that time, but the girl he was in a relationship was definitely placed in our lives for that reason. She was wonderful at looking after Parker and Mac, and I think placed there. Like, there's periods in our life God will place people just for seasons, and definitely there for that season. And just God reminding me, you know, that balance, and that's what drove me during that time. And that's all Kath cared about was the
Yeah.
boys, the boys, the boys, you know. And me too, don't get me wrong, but she knew I was a grown man, and they
Mm-hmm.
were young boys seeing their mom, like, fighting for her life.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, the real time where God was giving me an opportunity to be the dad I needed to be and step up. And I'm going to say there's times I'm sure I failed miserably during that. My focus might have been more on Kath and less on them. And there was struggles there, and it was never intentional, you
Mm-hmm.
know, not to be there. Like, it's
Yeah.
a hard balance
Yeah, for sure,
when
man.
you're
The grief
facing
is
something like
heavy.
that.
Like nobody, there's no like manual of how to go about
Mm-mm.
that situation, man.
Oh,
It's nobody should have to go through that, right?
mm-mm,
So
mm-mm.
we're gonna struggle, we're gonna make mistakes, but like you said, it's not about being shameful of our mistakes. It's about bringing us closer to God through it,
And
right?
it was, and Kath and I had so many good conversations about Christ, and prayed together, and we had a deeper, more something that we never probably had consistently in our relationship that he brought
Mm.
us to. And yeah, trying to just, and when she had her times where she was out of the hospital and at home, just the strength that she displayed to them, that instills in them even to today. I can see it in both Mac and Parker. Yeah, trying to make the best of it when we're home, and just like I said, nothing else mattered but our family at that time, like our nucleus,
Yeah.
right? And the other three boys too, still consistently. But unfortunately, the COVID was taking place, and my older three boys suffered in relationship because my time was spent with Kath and Mac and Parker, a lot of it, right? But
Yeah.
it was a period of growth. And God was like trying to go, okay, am I enough? Like, are you recognizing what life's really about? It's not about the sports. It's not about the activities. It's not about the little things you get angry about. It's not about your job. You know, all this is good and it's needed, but it should be me first. And
The
ultimately,
rest of this is blessings.
it is. And ultimately, we're all going to stand before Him. We're all going to answer for our lives. And when you're facing death, like Kath did, and the conversations we had, it all comes to that moment, and when we're going to all stand before Him. So He walked us through that.
Yeah. We touched on it in like the last take a little bit about how God placed people in your life at the like perfect times and stuff like that. Was there anything else you kind of wanted to touch on that part, or did you feel like we kind of covered everything? Anything that comes to mind right now?
Yeah, I think after we touched on some of that stuff, and clearly how, years before God had placed Rick, in Maple City, and Andrew and Stacy and Dan and Tara and other, I hate to name names because I don't want to, there's other people that impacted our lives for sure during that time. Like, Mike Van Kessel from work was really cognizant and communicating with me frequently and organizing things. Um, but then, it was after Kath passed when we really saw the weaving, you know. Um, and it wasn't without trouble afterwards because, after Kath passed, like a lot of some of the lessons that were learned during that time during my grieving, I was like forgetting again, you know, and wasn't fully walking away from God, but it was like just struggling, and the boys were struggling, and they're very strong personalities, similar to their mom. They hold everything in. They don't
Yeah.
talk about their feelings, and that was hard for me because I'm more of a talker, and they're
They're not gonna let
not.
you know they're struggling.
And I tried to have conversations, and it was just, how they were dealing with it, right?
There was like that little wedge that we talked about. Just a little bit.
A little bit. It wasn't a huge. We were good. We were good. And Andrew and Stacy were a big part at that time. Really, they were spending a lot of time with them, and Stacy had kind of filled that female role, the
Yeah.
nurturing role that the boys needed. And I knew they were good that way. And I'm searching. And then, like I said, the old friend that I worked with, we hadn't talked for Erica, who is now my wife. We hadn't talked for a few years since we had crossed paths at work, on a team together for a bit. And last we had talked is when I left the team, and she knew Kath was sick, and she had heard from a coworker that Kath had passed away and wasn't aware of it, and felt bad because she didn't attend the celebration of life, or reached out at all. So felt compelled to reach out on phone, and then for us, a friendship started developing out of that, and obviously led to some feelings later. But
Yeah.
um, God was weaving at that time, and even though she wasn't a Christian at that time, uh, and my old pattern started, like just starting a relationship in a, like, not a completely honoring way to God. Still talking about being a Christian still, but it was, some things started to creep in there. And like I said, and then um, it was hard for her to come into that relationship, right? Because I loved my wife. I was grieving my wife. And sometimes I didn't think that I recognized that enough. This is a really hard situation for her to walk into too. And boys who had lost their mom, and she did it with such grace, you know. And when we talked about faith, she had a hunger about her, um, and had questions that led me to dig deeper. And God was at work there. God was loving enough to not let me go back into my old ways in this relationship, you know. And there was a time where I'm like, this I can't be in this relationship. She's not a Christian, and
Mhm.
it's bringing me back to some old patterns I don't want to be in. Um, there was a struggle there, and like I explained, then introducing her to the boys, uh, the Mac, and clearly they were going to struggle with it.
Yeah,
Should be
anybody would, right?
expected. It should be expected, right?
Like with the recent loss of their mom and like like anybody with a fresh like incident like that is gonna just whether it's feeling uncomfortable, weird, just like still sad about their mom, like whatever it is that they're feeling, they're gonna feel something, and they're probably gonna have a little bit of a difficulty navigating it, right? So,
Hugely, hugely, and and I recognize that, but I
mhm,
also wanted them to accept her, right?
yeah,
And that definitely caused some things I wasn't even aware of,
mhm,
especially with Mac. Um, God has since turned that around
praise the Lord.
incredibly. Um, but that caused some issues, and not because and Erica was so graceful in her approach. She didn't push herself on the boys. She understood where they can. And there was conversation. She goes, if it's going to cause problem with your children, I'm going to walk. I don't. They're way more important than anything here. And we had the discussion of, like, can we even do this relationship? Well, from a Christian perspective, I was finally communicating for the first time in my life when starting a new relationship that I need to put
You need to do
Christ.
this
I,
right.
I need to do this right. We didn't completely start right, but I got to put a halt on this. And I don't
Like, if
want
I
to
want this to keep going, we need to
100%.
stop and we need to start doing this right.
You hit it. You
Yeah.
hit it. And, and again, she has this graceful, loving heart, and she knew something was missing all her life, and
Yeah.
she started to see God present in times of her life way back, but didn't know what it was, that it was Him at that time.
Yeah.
And then she was introduced to Maple City and
Yeah.
just felt she like, I didn't even know this existed.
That was me. I was like, that's how I
This
felt.
exists. And like I was thinking when you were talking about that youth conference,
Hmm.
you probably would never thought that would even exist or be a thing, right? And that was her. And she's like, then she joined this women's Bible study. And at that time is when she got her cancer diagnosis. And she found some lumps and was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then we touched on a little bit about like her wanting to like not make me go through that again.
Yeah.
And again, her grace to do that. Like, it wasn't selfish because she knew if I wasn't in the picture, she's walking in alone for the most part. She had her friends and she had
Hmm.
her children, and like, who have now started to become part of my life too. She had a daughter and son and beautiful kids that have now become part of my life. Um, but yeah, the grace that was shown, but God was at work there too, right? And it kind of helped us halt everything too. And we both had things to learn during that her cancer diagnosis. She was God was at work in her life, and God was at work bringing me back and reminding me again, um, how far we had come, and the walk with Kath. And he took me back to those halls. He took me back just outside that door where she passed away.
Hmm.
And it was at that time, and we talked about the parable of the vineyard owner. And we talked about the parable of the sower. And for years, like I said, I wrestled with that. I'm wrestling. Am I the one in the rock? Am I
I
the
haven't
one
stopped
swallowed
thinking
by
about that.
thorns? And I'm like, it was all coming back. And I'm like, I'm both of those. And what I was never looking at is, how do I get to be the one in the good soil?
Yeah.
How do I get to be the one that produces fruit? And if I'm producing fruit, it's not for me. The
Yeah.
fruit's to serve. And I never even thought about it. I'm just like, am I a Christian, even if I'm in the rock and the soil, right? And now finally, you know, and then the parable of the vineyard keeper, and then example, that's Jesus giving me one more chance. I'll fertilize it, I'll dig around it, give me one more year.
Yeah.
And man, just during that time of her cancer diagnosis, I was so prominent for me, and everything changed from there. And through Maple City and the women's group and devotions and prayer with Erica, by the grace of God, she got saved.
That was beautiful. I remember, I can't remember if I don't think I was attending that Sunday, but like I remember either coming to Maple City like very shortly after, or maybe coming before and then just maybe being away that Sunday. But like I remembered being around when she was saved, and like I saw I saw a change in her because like the first time I met her, it was just a hello, like nice to meet you, la la la. And next time she's like smiling when she sees me. She's super happy to see me, la la la. Like I could see the growth in
Mm.
her happiness,
And
and
this is during cancer
yeah.
diagnosis and
And I didn't even know
treatments.
she had cancer.
Yeah. And chemo. And she continued to say, "Oh, I feel so much peace, even though despite the storm, you know." And again, like God gave me another woman that
Mm-hmm.
could be so strong and not want other people to see her in weakness.
Yeah.
And then he cared enough and loved her enough. So he weaved our story together and he used it to save her.
Yeah.
And he
Wow.
used it to her to save me
That's beautiful.
because now the questions are making me delve deeper. And now it's that when we talked about give me one more year with this tree, it wasn't just my faith. It was another chance to be the man of God I need to be as a husband
Yeah.
and as a father. And that's what really started to like, I was redeemed.
Mm-hmm.
And that really that drives me today. I want to be that man of God that guides properly and consistently and loving, and not just with Erica, but with the boys, and be the dad I wasn't, you know. And by the worldly standards, people might have looked at me and thought I was a great dad. You know me back in the
Mm-hmm.
years with the
Yep.
hockey and stuff like that, active in their lives, coaching,
Yep.
you know, always their school trips and everything. And by world standard, you might have looked at me as a good dad, but the most important part is that spiritual guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't me.
Yeah.
All that stuff I was doing was for me, but without an eternal purpose.
Yeah.
And now God gave me another chance to go, okay, you had your time, you made it about you long enough. Now everything you do, do it with an eternal purpose because you only have so many days left.
Yeah. It's like God almost stripped everything from you and said like you got to build it right this time, right?
From the ground up, and that's a great way to put it. I never thought of it that way, but he did, and from the ground up. And since then, you know, Erica walked through cancer, like the chemo, surgery, um, and again with that peace and that faith, and our faith grew together. And there's nothing like the intimate. People think of intimacy in a sexual way. There's nothing like the intimacy of a couple that comes together frequently in prayer and
Prayer
reading. There's
and
nothing
the
like that
word.
intimacy that where your relationship's focused on him first, and it's become that, and God's given us that opportunity. And you know, after her cancer treatment, we're like, okay, let's do this right. Let's get married. You know, and that's hard because you know, again, the family taken into
Mm.
consideration. And by then, God had already started to heal some of Mac's wounds regarding the relationship. And that day, he was so gracious, and he read something at our wedding, and it's like just saw how God
Yeah.
changed his heart. And Liberty was a huge part of that, and such a good, godly young man.
Yeah.
And
It's been an inspiration to me. He's been like we just talked before we started recording about like just like the testimony there. Like
well, you're part of the story.
yeah,
You're
how
part of the
me hearing
story.
his testimony
Yeah.
like is what sparked me to reach out to him after 5 years of no contact, which led to a phone call of like 100 questions about the difference between Catholicism and Christianity. Um, if if I was wrong about of thinking it this way, like all these questions that I was afraid to ask, right? And which led to me ultimately getting on my knees, telling God, I'm tired of doing things my way and I give everything to you.
Mm. Mm.
Led to a few months later getting baptized into Maple City, and I've been living for Christ for the last 7, 8 months, and like I felt the most fulfilled I ever have in my whole life. I've drank a full bottle of whiskey. I've won a lot of money gambling. I've done alcohol, drugs, all these things, and nothing has satisfied me the way living for God has, right?
Nothing will.
And but yeah, what I was getting at was like just just the power in somebody sharing their testimony, right? Like Mac just obeying God and saying, okay, I'm going to share my testimony for 15 minutes here for liberty, right? I'm one person that it impacted. There's probably countless others, and then who they go on to impact and what they go on to do is like, it's just,
And that's the weaving we talked about, and you know, the peace knowing where Cass is in heaven, and you know, of course, I miss her. I miss our relationship, and we never wanted that to happen.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, but it did, you know. And she was suffering so much, and to know she's not suffering anymore. But then how God used that, and like we talked about the weaving, because in all honesty, Mac probably wouldn't have ended up at Liberty, like we were saying, and the relationship with Andrew and Stacy probably wouldn't have, they came in at a time when Mac had lost his mom and just wrapped him up, and they became instant family. That's not chance, that's God. And then the fact that they're Liberty graduates and they have that hockey in common, and that God turned what was an idol, that hockey idol. I'm going to use it for my purpose now because it's going to get you to liberty. And that was the path to liberty. And then the path to Mac becoming stronger in his faith, and like his grieving period, that like, because he was at Windsor U before and he was going through some phases there that he was struggling quietly on his own, some that wasn't even aware of. And then, but then through God's grace, he weaved Andrew and Stace, and then Mac to liberty, and then his testimony, and then his testimony led to you. And like you said, that's only one story of the impact that Cass' life and passing, and then Christ intervening, has had on so many people since. And you know, he redeems me. He's given me another opportunity, you know, that I'm not going to pass up. And I think you were there for the men's breakfast.
Yeah,
And,
that was the first time I actually fully heard your testimony. And speaking of, like, that was the day that I realized, like, that was the first time I had heard that Erica was struggling with cancer and stuff. Like, up until that point, like, I had seen her every Sunday and I just didn't know, right? Like, no idea. And like, that just, I can't help but think of like, you guys were able to, like you said, just like have that intimacy with each other and support each other enough to the point where like other people didn't even really know what was going on because of like how well you guys were handling it, right? And not to say that there wasn't struggle, but
it was, but she did it with such grace,
yeah.
you know, and she has this incredible heart, you know, and God even made it bigger and better. And he didn't, we're so undeserving. I'm so undeserving, Logan. You know, my life, I like, it should have been me, not Kat. It should have been like, she was so much better. And then to give me, you know, a second chance, and a woman like Erica too. And like I said, just that redemption. And like you said, that, you know, it's 6-7 months, and they're probably the best months of your life because there's a freedom. You know, the world will look at Christianity and think you're shackled and you're handcuffed and your rules and regulation. But what they don't recognize, it's actually them that's shackled and handcuffs. And they're chasing things that'll never bring freedom. They'll never bring joy. And you've experienced yourself, and you're shackled and you're chains, and you start off and you don't even recognize that those handcuffs are slowly being put on to those clicks start coming, right?
Yeah.
And through God's grace, you know, he saved us, and you and Erica and countless others that are being, you know, impacted. I know by Mac and his now new relationship with Sophia. That would probably be his future wife. Shout out, she's a great girl. So we're excited maybe about that. But yeah, how God's been at work there. But I brought something that I had shared at the breakfast, but it's written down. Can I share it again? Because it was, like I said, I didn't want any more wasted days. And I look back at the years that I thought I was being a great dad and a great husband, great coach and everything. And it's really nothing, because it was about me. And And not to say those things aren't a factor, but if there's no eternal value in it, if there's no leading people to Christ through it, like that's where we should be pointing our fingers to Him, not
100%.
ourselves, and not looking for praise. And I know looking back, that was me. You know, it wasn't for the right purpose.
Yeah.
So when I say no wasted days, I want my days to be a boldness for Christ. I want my days with whatever I do to have like an internal impact, not just an impact on the day or on myself or looking for anything. So when I was going through that and I was struggling with that, I was brought to a verse, and it's in Psalms, Psalm 90, verse 12. It says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And I sat on that because I'm 54 years old now, and I can't help but look back and go, man, you got it wrong so much in your life. And so I'm going to do a calculation here. So I said 54, I'm 53. I'm aging myself, I guess. But so I had written down, like, I'm now 53, and here's a glimpse of what I called my wasted days. So up to this point, when I did this calculation, I had been alive for 19,439 days, approximately 2,800 weeks. I said, I'm frightened to think what I had done in those days, in those weeks. And you look at the average global lifespan is 71 years for a male. So that's 26,000 days. So on average, I would have 6,562 days left here on this earth, or 937 weeks. And that's an average. We all know I could go sooner or live longer, but that's an average. And our Christ, Lord, or Savior could come back before then too. But stats on average say our most influential years as parents are between the ages of 0 to 7. And that's total days of 2,557 days, roughly 365 weeks, which isn't much. And we can see how quickly that goes. Averages suggest you'll have about 6,500 days, or approximately 939 weeks with your children before they move out. So this is kind of for the parents too. And after looking at that, that's not much. Like when I look at the days that on average I would have left is 6,562. I look at the wasted ones that I had with my children, and that message is more for the parents right now that have children right now and realize how quickly that goes and what impact you got to make. And just the question I leave for people is like, how many days are you using for your kingdom purpose, like Christ's purpose, and how many days are you going to use for yourself? How many days are you going to use to serve God and lead those you love as well as the lost? Or how many days are you going to continue to use to serve yourself? And there's nothing in serving yourself. You know, it's a loss. And that's what I finally realized. All my years of trying to be obedient and not, and just answering to my flesh, I realized I'm doing that. My obedience was based on fear, guilt, or shame. And now it's based on love.
Wow.
You know,
Never looked at it that way. That's a beautiful way to look at it.
like when you sit and you look at him on the cross, and I put those nails in his hands and his feet. And I repeatedly did it in my life. And through my choices and my rebellion. And he kept coming back to me.
Mm-hmm.
He never left me alone. He kept coming back. I'm like, why do you keep loving me so much? And that developed a great love for him. Finally, I got it. Finally, I'm like, it's not about guilt and shame. It's about, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
We're all guilty. We're all guilty. We're all condemned from birth. We have no choice. But he loved us enough to die for us and take those sins and that guilt and shame away. So my motivation is now love. My obedience is now love. Like if someone today, you were walking across the street and the car was about to hit you and they pushed you out of the way, and for life they were a cripple, would you not feel indebted to them?
Mm-hmm.
Would you not want to care for them and make sure their bills are looked after and everything else? Jesus did that, you know? So I think we need to love him and say he's enough. So
He paid it all for us.
100%.
Um, and like you said, not only did we put those nails in, like a lot of times, countless times in our life, over and over, but a lot of times it should be us on that cross, right? So,
It should be.
yeah.
You're right. And I look at it from a policing perspective because many times in the courtroom, I'm present when, say, the accused is found not guilty. A lot of times they are guilty, but they're found not guilty. And the look on their face of that relief. All right. Not guilty, you're good to go. All right. It's the difference in Christianity. We're not found not guilty. We are guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus came and said, you know what? I'm going to do your time. I'm going to pay the cost. You are guilty, but I'm going to wash it. And you're guilty no more. And not only that, I served your penalty. That's the beauty of it. How can you not love him after that? When you finally come to that full realization, how can you reject that? So,
Amen. Praise the Lord. Is there kind of anything else you want to leave with them before I end it off?
don't wait. Don't wait. If you're wrestling at a young age with right now full surrender to Christ and what that means, explore it. Talk to someone who knows what it means. There's no peace like the peace of being fully surrendered and walking the way you should with Christ. And it doesn't mean it won't bring struggle, but you look at the struggle differently. Like if you can look at struggle as like what good characteristics or qualities that will make me more like Jesus through this suffering.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way, it's a whole different paradigm in your mind.
Yeah.
And that's how you got to look at it. Because
Sure.
just I can speak from experience that it's been in my deepest sufferings and my deepest grief where the greatest growth has taken
Mhm.
place.
I like to say that, like, obviously I went through a lot of kind of hard things in my addiction, and I put my loved ones through hard things, and um, there's a lot of regrets, but at the same time, if I didn't go through all of those hard things and all of that pain and those regrets, I don't know if I would know the Lord the way I do today,
100%.
right? Like, I feel like maybe God can't put sin directly in like, He can't put us in sin, but He for sure can teach us stuff through it, right?
He can use it.
Yeah.
And it's your love is stronger when you realize how much you've been forgiven for.
100%.
You can't help like, wait, you took all that shame, all that guilt, all that regret, and you removed it?
Yep.
How can I not love you more?
And what can I do to
I think
repay
he
you?
does. He allows us to walk our walk because we might not appreciate him as much as we do if we hadn't made those mistakes in the first place. And they can be, look at the Bible's littered with people who made mistakes,
Mhm.
and he used them for his
Yeah.
glory. Right?
Amen. Well, I think we covered everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you guys, everybody, for watching. Thanks, Sam, for coming on. Don't forget to drop a like, and if you guys want to support the podcast, the easiest and cheapest way you can do that is to just subscribe. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps me out a lot. So, um, thank you guys for watching. Jesus loves you, and with that, we are out.